Welcome everybody. This is the Microsoft 365 on Power Platform community call. This is the Tuesday AM Pacific time community call happening every single Tuesday except on summertime and winter time on holiday season where we have a few weeks off in both ends. This will be the last call until we'll be back from the summer break, and we'll be back on 22nd of August. So unfortunately, there's going to be 1.5 months break because within this call, we're just basically trying to make sure that we get enough people from Microsoft presenters and PMs to be ready to go. My name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm a principal product manager in the Microsoft 365 platform areas, and I will be your host today. There will be a lot of other people though also talking and doing demos. Now we'll start with the updates and news on Microsoft 365 platform, touching of course Power Platform as well. Latest news across Microsoft blogs, group picture with together mode after that, and then we'll go to the actual starts of today. So this time Bob is going to start about Microsoft Teams app camp new adventure, and so there's a new version around the Microsoft Teams app camp, and he's going to cover what's available over there. Really good training material to get started on the Microsoft Teams development. Sébastien Levert is going to follow up on introduction to Microsoft Graph Toolkit search components. There is some super exciting last-minute news related on Microsoft Graph Toolkit, which I'm not going to spoil here yet. So Seb is going to talk about that one within the call as well. And then Paolo is going to continue his series about showcasing the Condoso retail application. And this time we're going to talk about securely consuming Azure Functions from the Microsoft 365 solution powered by SPFx. Just to call out, Paolo does not actually work for Microsoft, but this is a sample which will be built together with him and Microsoft employees. So we're kind of using that as an excuse for Paolo to showcase that on the Tuesday call. So typically on Tuesdays, we have Microsoft presenters as PMs and engineers and cloud advocates and so on. Now, let's get started on the typical setup of things. We do know that we're recapping a lot of the slides always on the start. If you prefer, you can always join a bit late. If you don't want to go to it's true, there's always, however, new people within this call as well. So we want to make sure that everybody is up to date on what's available. We have our YouTube channel with Microsoft 365 Power Platform community videos, all of our recordings, all of the community call recordings, all of the individual demos, all of that stuff is getting published within that YouTube channel with more than 41,000 subscribers. So please do subscribe over there. We have our LinkedIn group for discussions and updates. We do share news over there. We do share the together mode pictures over there, and you can ask questions and share your findings around these topics as well within that group. That's relatively new thing, but it's cool to see more and more attendees there as well. We do have our open source assets available in GitHub in multiple organizations, but as it might be a bit difficult to consume or find the relevant sample for you, we have our sample galleries, which will make that easier for you. And then, of course, if you're wondering where there's too many URLs to remember, luckily there's only one, which is akms/community/home. So that's a really easy URL to remember to find all of these assets. Now, as mentioned, this Tuesday call will be on a summer break, and this will be the last call of this until 22nd of August. And that's because we want to make sure that there will be at least 2 demos in every single call on Tuesday, so make it worthwhile for you. And we know that a lot of the Redmond people, not just Redmond people, but PMs and engineers in the Northern Hemisphere working for Microsoft are not available within summertime, so we're basically taking a break. All of the other calls will continue normally, so Power Platform, a monthly community call continues executing on a monthly basis, office add-ins as well, and then we have our 7 a.m. Pacific Thursday series, which is happening every single week throughout the summer as well. And that's either Microsoft 365 and Power Platform community call or Viva Connection and SharePoint Framework community call, typically with community demos. All of the recurrent invites available at community/calls URLs, and you can always see the agendas for these calls at community/meetup. And if you sign up for the meetup group, you will get actually notifications directly within your email whenever we publish the agenda of the calls. Now, we mentioned that some of the calls have a community presenters. We do welcome you to do these demos. We want you to do these demos. So this should not be about Microsoft dictating and telling you what we do. We want to actually hear from you. We want you to have the location and an option to showcase what you built and what you learn, because we learn from each other, and that's a super valuable thing to think, and valuable things to see from other people what they built on top of the Microsoft 365. So please take advantage of this one. It's akms/community/request/demo. That same form is used for Microsoft Dynamics calls, Microsoft 365 calls, and Power Platform calls. So it's the same form. Depending on what are you looking into presenting, will guide you to the right location and right call. and get your schedule. We also have a lot of assets available around getting started on a Microsoft 365 development. First of all, sign up for the Microsoft 365 developer program. It's a free E5 developer tenant, which renews automatically in every single 90 days. A lot of stuff also available in Microsoft Learn, and a lot of individual modules. So you don't have to pay for the getting started and learning how to do things in Microsoft 365 or Power Platform. Just take advantage of those as well.
Listening.
Now, we also have multiple different Microsoft 365 and Power Platform shows available for you. My PMP, Microsoft 365 PMP Weekly happens on a weekly basis. However, that's on a summer break as well until mid-August or so. That's hosted by me and Waldek Mastercards. We also have the Microsoft Community Mondays, Microsoft Mondays at Microsoft is the right thing. English is so hard. Mondays at Microsoft, hosted by Caruana and Heather, happening roughly on bi-weekly on Mondays. We have the Power Platform Connections, hosted by David Warner and Hugo Bernier, happening, I think, bi-weekly as well. And then Microsoft 365 Developer Podcast, hosted by Jeremy Flake and Paul Shuffling or Aisha Buzz. Good things to subscribe and stay up to date on what's happening within these areas. Now, I did mention the samples. We do have a lot of samples available from Microsoft, and we want to make it easier for you to find them. So we're aggregating all of the samples from Microsoft or from the community to this one centralized location, which is AKMF/community/samples. And this makes it super easy for you to find relevant scripting samples, find relevant Microsoft Graph script samples, or PowerShell samples, or CLI samples, or Teams development, or SPFx, or Power Platform, Power Automate, and so on. So there's a lot of stuff available. So please do take advantage of that one rather than starting always from scratch. It's a great location also to find some inspiration. If you're looking for, I would like to build something, I would like to have an ideas from something, having a look on what other people have built and then innovating based on that is a great way of coming up with new ideas. So great location for innovation as well. Now, as you find the sample, they're all, of course, published in GitHub. You might be wondering that, okay, now I know the sample is here. What do I do now? How do I get started? And you might have other questions related on how do I get started in Microsoft 365 on Power Platform. We luckily got you covered with our Sharing is Caring initiative, and David Warner, directly from LA, is going to explain what this is all about.
Live from Los Angeles. Thank you, Vesa. All right, everybody. So Sharing is Caring. Apologize for the voice today. I'm a little under the weather. Sharing is Caring is a program that is here to provide you hands-on guidance. And that means in safe space opportunities on live calls, we are going to work together to figure things out. Like, for example, using those samples or submitting those samples, navigating the GitHub landscape that may seem a little confusing. Now, we know that these schedules have been a little bit hit and miss lately. We promise you we will have them up by the end of this week. I promise you that. And thank you for all those that are volunteering to help out. If you would like to, please go to ak.ms/sharingiscaring/volunteer and let us know. Back to you in Finland.
Excellent. Thank you, LA. It is indeed sharing is caring, not sharing is scaring. Right?
That is true.
To be clear on that. Thank you, David, on that one. Now, coming back on the other things, what is happening? There are big events still coming on within the year. The next big one will be Seattle, August 21st to 25, which is 365 EduCon, related on Microsoft 365 and Power Platform content. And then that's following up on the 365 EduCon on October. There's a lot of other also events happening throughout the world. Between June and September, there's like multiple events in different locations. Have a look on them. Some of these have a cost. Most of them are free. Some of them might be hybrid. They might be online. So please go to the communitydays.org to find out the relevant events based on your interest. Now, quick recap on the news from last week. On the Microsoft 365 development side, there's an announcement of Microsoft Graph's CLI SDK preview or release candidate is available. There's a breaking change on Enum Property Edition, Teams Work devices in Microsoft Graph, so good thing to know about. We also announced a public preview of bot framework-powered Viva Connection extensibility, which is really cool as well. On the Microsoft Teams side, there was an introduction of profanity filtering control and customization of the transcriptions, which is really cool. And there's a lot of other stuff there as well. And there was also 3 ways to re-image hospitality and empower your frontline workers blog post, which is a really cool thing on actually telling the storyline where what if the people are not working on front of their desktop, and how can they still be successful on communications and more efficient by using Microsoft Teams and Microsoft 365 services. There's also an introduction of multiple Viva connection experiences for your company. This means that starting pretty soon, you can actually create multiple Viva connection companies based on, for example, profile properties, and then you can route the persons to a specific dashboard within a mobile or in a desktop experience. On Power Platform side, there was a June 2023 update on Power Automate for desktop, so all of the latest features and capabilities on there. And then there's a direct PowerFX Dataverse Actions support now in preview, which is really, really cool capabilities on Power Platform side. Now, before we go to the actual stars of the day, let's do a quick crew photo. For those who are willing to get a mode, I will flip the mode in here. Here we go. Still have a few more minutes before we are on the schedule. Oh, why is it pixelated? It's been pixelated now, unfortunately, within the past weeks, and not just on my computer, in other computers as well. So this is clearly unfortunate, a bit unfortunate. Let's hope that will get fixed in the future. We can still see people waving hands, so that's important. So I will still record this. Oh, it's getting a bit better. And let's do some hand waving, everybody. Thank you for joining on a call. I can still recognize familiar faces in here, even though it's quite pixelated. That is pretty mind-boggling. So you can guess, this is like 8-bit to get a mode in Microsoft Teams, right? But who wouldn't recognize Seb on the second row in the middle, showing how you do hand waving? Thanks, everybody. Really, really cool. Excellent. Let's actually then go to the real stars of the day. So we'll start with a Bob German, and then we move to Seb, and then we go to the Paolo on the last demos. But Bob, I think you're ready to go.
Yes, I am. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me on the call today. I had the pleasure, honor, really, to deliver a workshop at Microsoft Build a couple of weeks ago. And in case you missed it, I have some good news, which is that it's open source and everybody can do these hands-on labs and learn the material from this workshop. So it was called Build Microsoft Teams Apps Leveraging Existing Software Investments. And that's kind of been a theme with App Camp all along, is just the idea of reusing your existing investments. But the strategy in the initial set of labs, which are still there and still quite valid, was to take an existing website and transform that into a Teams application. And as a result, because the idea was that you might use any tooling on the planet to build your website, the idea was that we wouldn't use any tooling, any special tooling at all. Instead, we would provide an experience that would really help people to understand how to build their own or adapt what they had. The approach here is a little different. Everybody's got web services, and they've been extremely popular. We've had this service-oriented architecture thing going on for decades now. So the approach here is a little different. It's to say, well, your existing app is probably got a web service, whether that's public app on the internet, or maybe it's a private app inside your enterprise. There's almost always some kind of a web services layer. So the strategy then is to build a really simple Teams app with Teams Toolkit, which makes the development process much simpler, and then just use that to sort of wrap around or cover over your web service and deliver that value into Teams. So whether it's, and you'll actually get to do sort of a simulated enterprise web service, a public web service, and a Microsoft Graph. So you'll get to kind of do all these things. Now the strategy is actually to focus on message extensions, which is just one of the many ways that Teams apps can work. So this diagram kind of shows that your message extensions can run when you're composing your message, when you're acting on an existing message, or even in the command bar up at the top. And you'll actually get to build all of these things if you do the labs. And of course, I'm going to demo the whole thing for you in a minute. So the way this works, just a little bit of a briefing here, is just that the message extensions, you need real-time communication from Teams, where somebody maybe clicked a menu item, and you need to immediately get to your app and wake that app up. And it's got to be secure, and it's got to be fast and real-time. So For that reason, they use the bot framework, which is already great at delivering real-time secure messages. And you use the Teams channel for your users using Teams to call your app, which then turns around and calls the web service. And we'll look at some of the code for this. The cool thing is that now we can even accommodate more users by adding the new Microsoft 365 channel, which currently allows Microsoft Outlook to also participate. One can only imagine that they didn't call it the Outlook channel. Maybe they have some further plans for this in the future. Not sure even what client that would be. Maybe it's just really long term, but it's cool that they're sort of aggregating it, the whole idea of it across Microsoft 365. So let me show you what you can build with these labs. And then as time allows, I will show you some of the code. I guess first here is the, and I'll put the URL into the chat. It's aka.ms/appcampnew. The old URL still works, but this will bring you right to the new labs. And you'll see there's 6 labs. The very first one, you're going to create an app with the Teams Toolkit that is kind of like the hello world of message extensions. And then we're going to allow you to integrate an enterprise web service with that. And then we'll add something called link unfurling, which I'll show you in a minute. It's pretty cool. And then this actually, by the way, covers every kind of message extension. So that's kind of unusual to have all of them in one place, because the next thing will be an action message extension with OpenAI. So now this is showing you how to call an API on the internet, which is the OpenAI, the Azure OpenAI service, and then it'll show you also in Lab 5 how to do single sign-on and call the Microsoft Graph, which is a secured web service with single sign-on. And then finally, you run it in Outlook. So those are all the steps, and everything is incredibly detailed, step by step, starting with getting your tenant and setting everything up. So you should be able to just follow these instructions. And then if you have any feedback or questions, you can click here to go to the repo. And we're actually using the issues in here to orchestrate that stuff, as well as this is where your finished solution files are. So without further ado, let me just pop in and show you the finished solution. So I'm going to start with an instance that I have deployed to Azure. One of the great things about Teams Toolkit is that it makes it really easy when you've got your app working to just click a button and off we go to Azure. So I'm here talking to my colleague, my fake colleagues, Megan and Nestor. They're some of the fictitious users you might have in your tenant as well, right, at this point, because they come with the free subscription. And I'm just going to come in here and go to the Northwind Suppliers app and start typing the name of a supplier. And what will happen is it's going to go out and query the Northwind service. So this is the simulated enterprise service. We didn't want you to have to set up a whole web service just for the lab. And pull in some data, and then we can come in here and click on one of these, and it will make a nice little adaptive card for us that we can use and share with our teammates. So there's another lab in the original app camp that shows you how to put input fields on this adaptive card and actually accept updates from the user who receives it. We didn't really take it that far. Actually, I would love to get some kind of feedback on where we should go with this, because this was it could just be the first step of doing all kinds of other things. But anyway, so you'll learn in this exercise kind of how to consume a web service, expose it in a search message extension, and build an adaptive card that you can then share in Teams and Outlook. The next, I'm going to do these a little bit out of order. The next one that I'll show is actually Lab 5, which is the single sign-on with the graph. So if I come into my contacts list, actually let me just pop in here and show you. I need to be in Outlook for a future part here anyway. And I'll just kind of go to the little people icon here and show you my personal contacts. So the fake business scenario here is that we're Northwind and we're managing our suppliers. And it's perfectly reasonable that I would be building a relationship with a new supplier like AdventureWorks or ADatum, and I would have their data in my personal contacts list. So what if I want to share that in Teams? Do I want to copy and paste? No, I don't want to copy and paste. I want to click here, come right into here, do a search in my contacts, type a letter or two from the name, and without signing in again, nothing up my sleeve, right? It's going to actually go and use single sign-on to get the necessary Azure AD token to get my contacts, enumerate all the ones that have A in them, and then I can go ahead and insert one of these into the conversation. Very simple. Now, we could have put in another adaptive card here, but basically the idea is let's not repeat the same sort of work over and over again. So we're just using a really simple card here. But the point is you've got all that data now from the Microsoft Graph that users can now bring into a conversation and share with one another very freely. The next one shows a what's called an action message extension. And these don't get as much love as I think they deserve. To run this, I'll come in and I'll click this button, generate message. And in this case, we're going to call Azure OpenAI to generate a message. Now there's actually a variation in this lab if you prefer to use the OpenAI public service, which is not from Microsoft, right? OpenAI is a different company. You can use that too, and there's just some different instructions for that. But we encourage you, if you can get access to an Azure subscription, to set this up yourself and have a lot more control over the environment. Also, any information that gets sent in is kind of inside of your Azure tenant and not in a public shared web service where they might be training the web service based on your business data, which, it depends on your business, how big of a deal that is. So here we've got a prompt and it just says, please generate a message. And we're getting kind of a generic message. So let's say to welcome the PNP community. And I can click generate again. And what's actually happening is that it's going to, it calls the web service, obviously, but then it generates an adaptive card each time, which is getting displayed. So I'm actually interacting with an adaptive card in here. And so you can iterate with this as many times as you want, or the user can, and then finally send that message in. Now, another thing that I think is a really cool capability that not everyone knows about is the ability to act on a message. So here, Megan has sent in a message. Do you want to go out to lunch today? And rather than kind of copying and pasting and things like that, you'll get to build an AI reply capability, which will go and reach in, take her message, take the original message that I pointed to, and either generate an agreeable response, maybe disagreement. I can't go to lunch today, but I'm going to be real polite and business about it. I could get silly and write a poem about how great it would be to go to lunch together. A day out with you in the sun will make my day complete. It's done. Or I can even generate a silly joke, and these jokes tend to be pretty bad, although they are not really too offensive. So that's good. So let's do the poem. It'll actually be a different one, and send that out. And then let's see, what am I missing? The final one is called link unfurling. So this is a cool way to get people into your app. Maybe your app is, maybe you have no user training, nobody knows about your app at all, but they just take a URL from the web-based version of your app and paste it into a Teams message, right? And what will happen is if the things are cooperating, I see what happened. Okay, the problem here is that I've run another app in the background. I'm going to try to spin this up locally. So Teams Toolkit is now going to run. So what happens is I ran it locally, and that it's kind of whichever one got registered last is the one that's going to work. So when it sees this URL with Northwind in the host name, it's actually going to try to trigger that message extension, and it actually has to be running locally for that to work. So so far I've been showing it off of my Azure deployment, which had a couple of advantages. One of which is there is a kind of an issue right now, just a fair warning, that sometimes these bots take a while to start up. If you've just created a brand new bot, it can take a minute or two or even 10 to get running. They're working on this, but just don't be distressed if you go to do the labs and you're running locally. You don't actually have to. If it seems like it can't connect, just wait a minute, and there's a good chance that it will start connecting. Okay, so it's taking a second. My computer's chugging along here. And this is what it looks like when you deploy it into Teams. And then once that's running, we'll see if we can get that link unfurling to work. So again, the idea here is that users may not know about your app, but they probably know that there's some way for an app in general to have a URL. And I just want to send that URL to my friend, right? So when I paste it in, it should work this time. There we go. So it actually went and looked at the URL, pulled it apart, realized the supplier ID, and pulled out information and injected that automatically without the user having to do anything. This could be a full-blown adaptive card where the user could take action and things based on what that URL is. So you'll get to build all of this in the course of doing the labs. I'll just show real quick a couple of features of the code. So basically, almost every lab, what you're going to do is add a new compose extension here in that this is the Teams manifest, which basically tells Teams where everything is, right? And every time you do one of these labs, you're basically going to add some code to handle the request, and then you're going to add to the manifest a new feature, a new message extension, or they're called compose extensions in here. So here's the look up the supplier search. Here's the generate a message using AI. You've seen all 5 of these, right? And every one of these is going to come into my code only because Teams knows this information about the structure of the message extension. And don't worry about learning the details here, because when you do the labs, it'll walk you through every detail, every click. And then if I kind of come down here to my Teams bot, kind of what you're going to end up doing is building, notice that up here, every one of these message extensions has its own little JavaScript module. So you're going to add all of those to the main bot project, and then where the sort of hello world that you get from Teams Toolkit, just sort of everything's all in one piece of code, you're going to add a switch statement for every incoming request. So here we are getting the query from the search request, from one of the search message extensions, and we're going to dispatch that out to whichever ME message extension it is. Here somebody clicked on one of the items in the search. Here's somebody did the link unfurling, pasted in a link that matched, right? So every time there's an interaction, there's going to be one of these incoming requests, and then we're going to dispatch that out to the individual message extension code to actually go and call the web service and provide back the information. So I know I'm at time. So let me just sort of thank you for your attention and encourage you all to go check out these new labs again at aka.ms/appcampnew, and send some feedback, leave questions and comments in the issues list or here in the chat or what have you. And I thank you, and we'll pass it back to Vesa for the next awesome demo today. Maybe
excellent.
The next one will be for sure.
No, this was really, really good. A lot of exciting stuff, and a great teaser for what's available within the exercises. So thank you, Bob, on that. Awesome stuff. Now let's then move to Sébastien Levert, and we're going to talk about Microsoft Graph Toolkit. Seb, I think you have some news for us.
Do I have news? I might have news. So today, folks, I want to discuss one of a really cool new feature that we are enabling as part of the Microsoft Graph Toolkit for our latest release, which is search components that are now baked into the Graph Toolkit. Today, we're going to really focus on these components and see the power and the richness of these components. But before, if you've never heard about the Graph Toolkit, I'd love to give you a little bit of a quick run through of what the toolkit is. So the toolkit is a collection of reusable framework agnostic components and auth providers that allow you to work and access Microsoft Graph. Think about them as drag and drop components inside your app where you don't have to think about how to authenticate, how to deal with caching, how to deal with throttling, how to deal with styling, how to deal with looking like M365. It's all done for you. So the components are fully functional. They're really just, you add them to your page, magic happens, but they're fully customizable. So if you want them to match your corporate brand, or you want them to have different behaviors, well, you can absolutely do that. And they work with any web framework on all modern browsers. So you want to work in React, we got you covered. But you want to work in Angular, in Vue, plain old HTML, Blazor, anything you're thinking of, the Graph Toolkit will actually work for you. Why should you care about the toolkit? First, it cuts on development time. If you're like me, I'm a very lazy developer. If I can use something that is already available out there that has been tested and proven, I'll be happily getting these components and putting them in my app so I can focus on my business value rather than building people pickers and person cards and avatars and all these things that are fairly similar from one app to the next. You also care because they're beautiful, but they're flexible. So we are leveraging our Fluent 2 design system here at Microsoft, where all the components now, they just feel like they're part of Microsoft 365. So if your app is participating in the M365 experience by living in SharePoint, in Teams, in Outlook, in Office.com, well, this will make your life way easier because it's just going to be the same thing. But you can also fully customize them if you want to make it very similar to your own brand. And finally, it just works everywhere. It works on the browser, works on Electron, works on mobile, works anywhere you're thinking of. But today we have a really, really nice surprise. Well, it is finally live. We launched today, approximately 30 to 40 minutes ago. The blog post is available. If you go on devblogs.microsoft.com, it will be one of the latest blog posts that you're going to see there. The Microsoft Graph Toolkit v3 is now fully available, supported by our team. We can't wait to see you try this out and implement it in your app. We've been working on this project to get the Graph Toolkit to v3 for the last 18 to 24 months. We're really looking for your feedback. So we're excited about the opportunity to add new capabilities in your app. But today, let's focus on one thing only that really brings a new set of capabilities to the Graph Toolkit, which is our search components. Our search components are two separate capabilities, two separate components. One which is a search box that allows you to search, to basically enter a search query. And second, a search result component that allows you to render results coming back from Microsoft Search, living on the /search/query endpoint of Microsoft Graph. So let's start with going through a very simple demo that we have in our storybook, just to show you kind of the potential of such a component. So let's start. I'm here. I'm in my environment. The first thing you're going to notice now, you see 3.0.0. It's probably not as exciting as it is for you than it is for me, but we're really, really excited to get this one out of the door. Super, super excited. So here's a good example of how you can get started with search. So as you can see in the HTML here, there are two things, an MGT search box and an MGT search results component. The first one has absolutely no properties, no attributes configured or whatsoever. And the second one has one, which is the entity types. Here it just means that the result should only bring back drive items. Drive items, what are they? They are basically files and folders across Microsoft 365. So they can be in SharePoint, they can be in OneDrive, they can be basically anywhere in Microsoft 365. These are kind of the foundation of building search-driven applications with the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. How do they connect to each other? Well, the search box here will emit some events saying that the search term has changed, and you will take that query from the search box and add it or apply it to the search results. So let's go look at the JavaScript code that we have here, which is, by the way, very, very simple, right? So here, the only thing I'm doing is I'm getting my search box, I'm getting my search results using the query selector on the tag name, actually. And here I am listening to a search term changed event. So that's the glue between our search box and our search results. And I just need to set my query string to be the content of my event that has been emitted by my search box. So very, very, very simple capabilities, really not a lot of code to build an experience like the following. So let me do this here. Let me go there and let me search for Contoso. And now when I hit enter, automatically I can find all the Contoso drive items that are anywhere in Microsoft 365. Here, I did not specify a specific location or a subpath or whatever, which are all things that you can do. But I went the most generic possible, where I can find these components. These components can automatically, if I click on it, it's going to automatically open up the document. I see my folders, I see all type of things. At the bottom, you can see our paging component, which allows me to go from one page to the next. And you will see that we have a lot more configuration possible with this component, but we wanted to keep it as simple as possible for this demo. So that's really the core of the capabilities that we have. But this is an MGT component, a Graph Toolkit component. So what does it mean? It means that it integrates with the rest of the toolkit. How? First, it supports our brand new toggle capabilities for our theming. So if I put it to be color code in dark, boom, automatically my results are now in dark mode. You can configure that. You can bring your own theming also in there with your own colors very easily. Another capability that is interesting is the fact that now we have the ability to go in and have our person card directly in there. So it really helps with identifying who's the author or the creator of such files. And you can start looking around and finding, oh, so it's Megan, which reports to Diego, which reports to Patty. Basically, we're really reusing a lot of the components that the Graph Toolkit is making available. So this is really like a simple capability. You add to your page two different tags, these two ones, the MGT search box and the MGT search results, and there you go, you're good to go. But potentially you will want to build a much more advanced application with this, and that's what I want to showcase, some of the really cool customization options we have with the Graph Toolkit search component. So let me go here. Let me show you this app. This app ships with the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. If you want to run it, you're absolutely free to go. You will have all the instructions on our repo, aka.ms/mgt. This is our hero app that basically showcases all of the capabilities of the Graph Toolkit in a much more advanced way, where you can really see some sort of real-life scenarios as part of the toolkit. One of them being having a search-driven application. So here, I can go in here, can hit on search and say Contoso. I'm logged in already. And here you're going to find a couple of things. The first thing you're going to find is this here. Not only we support V1 endpoint of search, but we also support the beta endpoint of search, which means that we support Q&A, bookmarks, places. We support a lot of the extensions of Microsoft Search. So in here, when it found a bookmark in my bookmark system in Microsoft Search, and it highlighted it for me, similar to how Office.com or the SharePoint default experience does it. Then afterwards, I can find a couple of sites. Here, I find a PDF file, and I can go from one to the next here. So a couple of capabilities that are really interesting. The first one is the fact that I can fully customize the rendering of these things. So for example, if I go to Files, here I've completely redone the rendering of my files. I'll show you the code in just a moment, where we're basically using this as a way to get the data, make sure the data is clean, that it's easy to render, and then afterwards render it as part of a nice grid provided by the Fluent UI team. Really, really cool stuff. Something also that we do, if I go back here and I search, for example, for Megan, you also have the ability to search for other types of content, in this case, people, and we are rendering you the full experience using the Microsoft Graph Toolkit components right in there. If I go to external here, it should tell me that I didn't find anything from Megan. So let me go and try Microsoft 365. We also support connector data. So if you want to ingest your own line of business data inside Microsoft 365 to make it part of the search experience, you will be able to easily bring that component in there. And it really, really helps with bringing line of business, SQL, databases, on-premises SharePoint data. All of that are external items that are being ingested directly inside your Microsoft 365 tenant. So let me show you a little bit of code before I hand it over to Paolo. First, here I'm showing you my header, where we have this nice component right here, where basically here I'm using our React components, where I just need to say, hey, when there's a search term changed, just run this function, and it's going to automatically orchestrate my redirect to my search page. It's going to assign the search term to my app context, and so on and so forth. Then my search page is fairly simple, right? I have a tab list. I have 4 different, let's call them verticals or silos or source of information for search. And I have 4 specific custom components that are in here, one which is all results, one which is files, external items, and people results. So let me show you the all results, which is very, very, very simple, right? In search results, I have 2 things. A first search result, which is here, where I specify which entity types I care about. In this case, it's bookmark, because I just care about the bookmarks that are in there, and I just care about the first one. I just want to show the top number 1 bookmark that I find. And here, I just say, by the way, if the user hasn't already consented to read the bookmarks, I want the user to consent when we're going to run this search query. So this is one configuration of the search results with a little bit more details in here, right? Second thing here is my search results at the bottom, where I can pass in an array of different types of content: drive item, list item, site, where I will need these 2 scopes, and where I will want to fetch the thumbnail of these items. So if a thumbnail is available, we will actually print it on the screen for you. Another really, really good example is how it can be super simple also. People result is literally a one-liner, right? Where we have entity types, where we just specify, I want to find the 21st people that match this search term, and that is it. So it really provides a rich set of customization options, but also you can really use it out of the box to render what you want. Finally, let's look at file result. File result here is actually a lot more complicated than all the rest. So let's look at this search results here. In this search results, I say, I want this type of entity. I want to fetch a thumbnail. I want to provide a query template. If you're used to SharePoint search with their keyword query language, it's very similar here, where you say, I want to use a search term, but also I want to augment it to be just this type of content type, or this path, or this managed property equals this value. I want to also bring more managed properties so I can play with them. In this case, I want to bring the created by, the last modified date time, the title, and the default encoding URL. I want to change the size of my pages. So here I'm going to do 30 items. That's why we saw 30 items earlier. But also here, I'm going to enable cache. So look at this. If I go back to files here, you're going to see that here I only have one. Let me go Contoso. you're going to see how quick these things are. If I go to page 2, it's going to fetch it. If I go to page 3, it's going to fetch it. But if I go back to page 2, it's going to be instantaneous because we actually cache the results in your browser. So you don't have to re-ask for it. It's going to cache it for a couple minutes, and afterwards it's going to expire, and then you're going to go back. And how do we render this really nice looking grid? Well, we're using here our file template. And the file template here is just a simple data grid provided by Fluent UI, where we pass in our items, which is our drive items that were found by the search query. So it's a really, even though it's a complex component, it really enables you to reuse a lot of what you have been using to build your component. So we're really looking forward to what you will be building with this search component. We're looking for your feedback. This component is in preview for now. It's not fully V1. It's part of our V3, but it's in preview. We're looking for the feedback. Please come to our repo, log issues, log feature requests. We'd love to hear you on these capabilities. Back to you, Vesa.
Excellent. Thank you, Seb, on that one. Really, really cool. And thank you, Gavin, helping on the background on the questions and helping, of course, creating the capabilities. That's really, really cool. So thank you both on that one. Then let's jump on Paolo's topic related on securely consuming Azure Functions from Microsoft 365 solution powered by SPFx. That is a long title. I guess I wrote that one, Paolo, didn't I?
Yeah, that was you, definitely. So I guess you can hear me and you can see my screen, right?
Yes. Okay.
So I'm ready to go. Thank you. So yeah, I will show you just a couple of slides to give you a bit of a context. Of course, this is me, but I don't care. You can find it in the registration. And the context of this demo is about a solution that we have been working on in the last few months to give an example of a end-to-end solution that you can build in Microsoft 365 using different kind of UI layers and leveraging the whole Microsoft 365 ecosystem. The overall idea is to use SharePoint Framework as the development framework for creating a Teams personal app and the Viva Connection ACE, and potentially in the future much more stuff, and using a backend which is based on a .NET Azure function, which will provide hypothetical data from an hypothetical backend storage. Of course, this is just a demo, so data will be still fake data, but you will be able to see the whole journey. Of course, we need to have a secure API in the backend, so we secured it with Azure Active Directory from an authentication and from an authorization point of view. And the interesting part of the story, in my opinion, is that the API that we have built is not only for SharePoint Framework, but actually you can use it from whatever platform you like, including, for example, the Power Platform. So you can create a Power Platform connector, and you can create a Flow or a Power App and still consume the same API that you are consuming from SharePoint Framework. And I think this is really powerful. So that said, let me move to the demo environment and let me show you step by step what you should do to achieve this goal. First of all, this is the demo I'm going to talk about. We already have a couple of other demos registered in this section of community calls, where you can see how we have built the UI in Teams and in Viva Connections. Today, we focus fully on the backend API implementation. The solution is available as an open source one on the sample solution gallery under adoptionmicrosoft.com, and you can find it under solution, sample solution gallery, and then you can search for it. But you will also find a useful link at the end of my presentation. And this is the UI of the Viva Connection dashboard, for example, where we have a card consuming data from an hypothetical retail store company. And here we have the personal app in Teams. Both the personal app and the Viva Connection card rely on a backend API, which has been built with .NET on Azure. This is the Swagger page for providing auto-generated documentation and to provide also support for the Open API protocol for our APIs. And for example, we have this API, the Get Customer Satisfaction Stats, which will give us back a set of information about the customer satisfaction. In order to consume this API in a secure way, we need to provide a token. And in fact, you can see in Swagger, we can click on the Authorize button and we can provide an access token, which will allow us to consume the API as it happens whenever we use it from Viva or from Teams. So let me do that briefly just to show you what's going on. So here I have in Postman a pre-configured request for a token, which I'm going to use to make an actual request to my API to give you an idea of what's going on. So let me save the token. Now you see the locker is closed, and I can try out my API, and I can execute a call and get back the statistics about the customer satisfaction, which is exactly what we see, for example, here in this component, in this widget of the personal app. So in order to being able to consume this API from SharePoint framework within Teams or within Viva Connections, we also needed to configure our SharePoint framework solution to being able to consume that API. And that happens because in the source code of the SharePoint framework solution that we created, we have a web API permission request section, which we configured in order to say that we want to consume the pmp.contoso.retail resource, which is the name of a resource that I've registered in Azure Active Directory and that I will show you shortly. And I want to have the permission scope called contosoretail.consume, plus a couple of more settings, which will be really helpful whenever you want to do multi-tenant registration in your target environment. I will not dig into this part right now because we have already covered it in other videos that you can find in the YouTube channel of the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform community. So here I'm just declaring that I want to consume this API and I want to have this permission for my solution. And in fact, in my target tenant, which is the one where I'm using my API, if I go to the API access page of the SharePoint Online administrative section, I can find that under the approved permissions for SharePoint Framework, we have that specific permission. Now, where do we find the definition of that permission? Well, let me go to my target tenant where I registered my application, and in Azure Active Directory, in a target tenant where I want to publish the custom API, I simply need to go under app registrations in Azure Active Directory right here, and I need to create a new application registration, which is something that I have already did for my solution. If we go under authentication, we can see that this is configured to be a multi-tenant API, so I will be able to use it from multiple tenants, and I'm exposing this application as an API. And in fact, here I have the application unique ID URI, API pmp.contosoretail, and I have a permission which is called precisely contosoretail.consume. I'm also exposing this API with app only, so I can also consume it without the specific identity of a user with the contosoretail.consume.all application permission. Why am I telling you that? Because we have this permission, which will be for delegated consumption, meaning that I will consume it under the identity of a specific user, and I will identify my target API with this unique URI. In fact, if I go back to SharePoint Framework, whenever I want in my TypeScript code to consume the API, I can simply rely on the AAD HTTP client factory object that is provided by the SharePoint Framework context, and I can make a request for a client to consume that API. And as you can see, this is precisely the unique URI that I configured in Azure Active Directory. So basically, by doing that and by having in the package solution.json file the declaration of this permission scope requirement, I will then be able to get a client object to consume my API. And then in SharePoint Framework, let me go to the section where I consume the customer satisfaction stats that we saw before. I can simply make an HTTP request through that client that I've got created with the getClient factory method, and I can target the API that I showed you in Swagger. So that's what happens from a registration point of view and from a SharePoint Framework consumption point of view. But to make it even more real, let me show you that when I am in this personal app and I have, the dev tools enabled, we can see that under the cover in the session storage of my browser, I have the access token that is going to be used to consume my target API. And in fact, if I copy this value and I show you in this nice tool provided by Microsoft, jot.ms, the actual content of the token. This is a delegated token, and in this token we can see that we can consume the API that I showed you before, and Paolo Pialorsi, so that's me, my current user, does have the permission to do the consumption of Contoso Retail. From an API point of view, you will find in the source code of the solution that we have a .NET API hosted on Azure. So here we are. This is my backend API implemented as an Azure function. And in this Azure function, where I have the customer satisfaction stats endpoint, I have a bunch of attributes to configure the Open API so that we can see in Swagger and we can use it from whatever platform we like, including the Power Platform. And then we have a custom attribute that I defined called function authorize, in which I declare that in order to being able to consume this function, I need a consumer to provide either the Contoso retail.consume permission, which will be a delegated one, or the Contoso retail.consume.all, which will be the application only one. This attribute will be managed when we will go through the pipeline of the request, because in the program.cs of my isolated Azure function, I configured a middleware, and credit to this guy who created the basic implementation that I've built the other solution on top of. And here we have a couple of middlewares, one for authentication and one for authorization. I will not dig into each of them, but basically in the authentication one, we validate that the token that we get is a token with proper user identity and which has been issued by a tenant that we trust. And in the authorization one, we rely on the function authorize attribute so that we can see if the request that is coming into the Azure function does have the proper permission scopes that we need. And as such, very, very briefly, in the authentication one, we use a token validator, which will validate the target tenant of the token that we receive. And if that is a good token, we can then simply store, let me scroll right here, after we have validated the token, we can simply store the token in the context of the Azure function, so that when we are in the authorization middleware, we can get from the context that token, and we can say, okay, we are invoking the API, let's get the token and the identity of the entity that is consuming our API, and then we can simply see if the user or the application that is consuming our API does have either the scope or the app-only permission that we need in order to being able to consume the target API. If that will be okay, wonderful. If not, we will give back to the user a 401, so a not authorized exception. By doing that and by publishing on Azure our solution, right here we have the Azure function that I created, and by configuring the course to enable the target SharePoint Online environment or any environment if you are in a multi-tenant scenario, you can then make your Azure function available to your SharePoint Framework consumers and eventually to any other consumer in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. Here you can find the source code of the demo. You also have a QR code for your convenience. And back to you, Vesa. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. We did share the URL in the chat as well, so you can access the sample from there. And thank you, Paolo. Really, really cool stuff. And it's good to recap that stuff because it's so easy to use. So easy to use Azure secured assets within the Microsoft 365 because you are in the same identity or in the same tenant. And thank you for calling out also the multi-tenant scenarios, Paolo, there. But we are running out of time. So thank you, Bob. Thank you, Seb. Thank you, Paolo. Really, really cool call. As said, as we started the call, next community call is on 22nd of August. And we do know that that's pretty far. That's only for the Tuesday call. So Thursday, 7 a.m. Pacific time, we will keep on having every single week a call, which you can sign up for as well. Please use the AKMS/community/calls if you don't have those recurrent meetings within your calendar. If you miss us, we will be there unless we are on a family vacation as well. Now, really important thing, please please do give us feedback. We want to improve these calls. We want to improve the processes. We want to improve the demos. We want to know what works and doesn't work, what you would like to see within here. So please fill in the form and let us know where we can improve. But that's it for now. The recording will be available within 24 hours at the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform Community YouTube channel at akms/community videos. You'll find the link from there. Subscribe is the easiest way to know whenever the videos are available. And the next call is on August 22nd. We will publish the agendas on that a bit closer, and I will update the AKMS link to the join link, which is in the recurrent meeting, point to a blog post where we explain the timelines and schedules and all of the other calls. So you'll have been routed on the right location. But that's it for now. Thank you for everybody for joining. Thank you one more time for all of the presenters and all of the attendees on a lovely discussion in the chat. Have a great summer if you have some time off. If not, please join on our community calls and stay active. Otherwise, we are here to help you. Your input is crucial for us as well. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe. Have a great rest of the week. Bye-bye.